A lot about learning loss, and this week we got numbers to back up how far kids fell behind because of the pandemic. Those numbers are concerning for parents and teachers alike. 90's race and equity expert Dr. Rosemary Allen is joining us this morning. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
This is so important to talk about. So with these test scores just being released, we saw a historic drop in reading and math scores. So tell us, how bad is this?
It's bad.
Yeah.
It's pretty bad. This study was conducted to really compare how students were achieving before the pandemic versus when they came back around 2022. And I don't think anyone was prepared for the numbers that we saw. We saw reading scores drop, the lowest that we've seen in 30 years, but overall scores dropped 50 years it took us back since the test was being administered.
And this is really across the board, right? I mean, not just in Colorado, just everywhere.
Nationally, everywhere.
And this hit certain groups more than others. So kids of color, people that live in poverty, this hit them even harder.
Yes, it did. What we saw was a 13 percentage point drop for African American students. 8% for Hispanic students compared to 5% for white students. So it's essentially we saw black students' percentage points drop was double that of white students. And this really exacerbated an already existing gap that we saw because there were inequities to begin with. What was very interesting is that in reading, the drops were more consistent. It was a 6-point drop for white students, black students, and Hispanics. But interestingly enough, we didn't see the drop for Asian Americans or for Indigenous students.
Why the drop? What did they figure that out?
Well, yes, we knew going in that there were already inequities. It's systemic. But once this happened, our children of color and those living in poverty did not have access to the resources. Many did not have computers at home. Schools worked very hard to correct that, but even once they provided the computers, many students did not have internet.
Right.
And they did not have the parents at home that more affluent children had. Many of the children living in poverty, their families were essential workers, grocery store workers, child care workers, bus drivers, healthcare workers, so they didn't have that additional support.
So now that we have this information, I mean, I feel for educators because they already had so much on their plate and now they're like having to make up for what happened. What is being done to make up those numbers?
Well, we know the federal government invested about $123 billion to help students catch up. But since this report, Corey, we know that this problem is more devastating. The magnitude of it is bigger. So we're going to have to invest more money. And we're going to have to understand it's going to take several years. The problem is multifaceted and multidimensional. So we have to attack this at the federal, state, and local levels. Another thing that we have to do, and you brought it up, is work with our teachers. We cannot address test scores without addressing the conditions under which teachers are working. We have a severe teacher shortage. Teachers are paid so little. Classroom sizes are huge, and the overall working conditions are awful. So we're going to have to look at what we're doing to support teachers so that they can better support students.
It's going to take everyone getting involved.
Yes.
And I know one teacher said this didn't happen overnight, so the change isn't going to happen overnight. It's going to be over time.
Right.
Yeah. Dr. Allen, thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it.